The House of Mystery presents Inside Writing, the radio show where authors discuss their writing process in all genres.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Mr. Dave Karate Martino is here.
I'm back.
Yeah,
my way through.
Are you recovered? Are you settled down now? Are you kind of...
Yeah, I'm pretty good. You know, I'm getting old, it's just,
Give me a bad time.
You know how it is.
Yeah, I certainly do. I've been old for a long time. I've been old before people were old, though.
Yeah.
Terrible. And so I was walking the dog again today. I'm starting to put them on Instagram, eh? And
I've missed out.
Yeah, no, it's all right. Not a big deal. I walk my little dog, and I show people my neighbor. Like today, I was like, because across the street is the guy that owns Skinny Jeans.
Okay.
It's this big mansion. So I filmed. I put that on Instagram. I'm
gonna have to check it out.
Guy. He's a nice guy. He's a nice guy. This is one of 5 of his homes.
Wow.
I always say that. I don't understand it because when he's here for a couple of weeks a year in the summer, he just kind of runs around the area, and he's got the perfect body with the tattoos and the teeth, and he's young looking and got all these fancy cars and big houses.
He's wearing skinny jeans.
Oh God, no.
No?
But I could probably, I was going to say, and that's what I said in the video, he'd probably give me a whole stack of them, but I don't think I'd fit in them. Right?
I wouldn't.
I wouldn't feel comfortable in them either. But, somebody's got to do that. Why don't you do that?
Me?
Do karate jeans.
They have those. They used to.
Really?
With a gusset. Yeah, so you could kick. Kicking jeans. Chuck Norris used to advertise them.
Oh, I thought that was always a joke.
No. That was true. This, they have a joke where they make them, they Photoshop it so they're cutoffs.
Yeah.
But no, that gusset was real. I never had those jeans, but I know people who did.
What kind of thing is that? Gusset.
Gusset? Yeah, gusset so that you could stretch out more.
Sounds like a stomach.
Because you might have to kick. Gusset. You're walking around the neighborhood, you might have to kick.
Well, it happens to me every day, right? I mean, I'm being attacked by the mob. I have to kick.
You have to kick.
Anyway, well, so let's what have we got going on today? So we have got an author with us today. His latest book is called Sunset and Jericho, a Wakeland novel. So all the way from the Great White North, we have Mr. Sam Wiebe. So thank you for being here, Sam.
Oh, thanks for having me, Al. Appreciate it. And I don't know how great and white it is, but I'm definitely up here.
You want people to believe it's really cold and lots of snow and all. You don't want Americans coming up there. What are you thinking?
I think if they realized that it's basically just Seattle with a different money, they'd freak out a bit.
It's a clean Seattle. See, I'll get the hay mail. Don't worry about it. Or a Dave loans.
Yeah, he always says it to me. Forwards it.
Yeah, he can deal with it. But well, so how did you get into this fancy lifestyle? Like you're a big time writer and in the city of Vancouver and doing well. Tell us about your writing history. How did you get into writing?
Well, I always wanted to be a writer, which I'm sure everybody says. And about when I was going to college, I just realized that if I didn't put up or shut up, if I didn't just write a book and, if it sucked, it sucked, I'd regret it. So I wrote one, and indeed it did suck. And then I wrote one that sucked a little bit less, and that one ended up getting published, and shortly after that, I started the first book in this series about a Vancouver PI named Dave Wakeland.
So, but what gave you the confidence to actually put it out there and try to get published? People can read it and see it. There's a difference between thinking, I can write, and you can even write, but to actually start submitting it and trying to get it published.
Well, I read Stephen King's own writing and other books about the craft, but I also remember in an American Lit class, we watched an interview with Robert Frost, and one of the things he said, and this is a little pretentious, but he said, you have to start on insufficient knowledge. And that really impressed me that, even the greats are basically making it up as they go. So You just have to, put your stuff out there and accumulate rejections, and, there really are no shortcuts to that process. And you learn from getting those rejection slips.
Well, what inspired you to move towards crime fiction as opposed to any other genre?
I mean, as a kid, I read everything. I mean, I loved westerns and literary fiction and, any sort of potboiler bestseller. But I remember being about 18 or 20 and just looking at my bookshelf in my room and thinking, wow, most of these are crime novels. There's a lot of Elmer Leonard, a lot of Robert B. Parker and Ian Rankin, and I hadn't really set out to become a mystery fan, but I guess I was one. And really the same process repeated with writing. I tried writing the, overwrought teen and early 20s guy, literary fiction, and it was just not, it wasn't me, it wasn't my voice, and it wasn't what I wanted to talk about. But the second I started writing crime fiction, it felt like a really good fit, because it's a little bit literary, it's a little bit genre, and it allows you to write about real subjects, but in a way that I think readers respond to. They're not on guard about social issues and things like that.
So what is it about the crime mystery area that is enticing to you to actually write in? And how hard-boiled do you get in your mysteries?
Well, I think crime fiction is about guilt and it's about death, and those are very universal subjects to people. I feel like my books are pretty realistic. Some people have called them hard-boiled, and some people have objected to the violence, but I just try to be honest with that stuff and with the consequences of violence. So, I really took a lot of inspiration from the Chandlers and James Crumley and Walter Mosley and people like that. But, I also don't want to write about the 1930s. I want them to be very contemporary. I just try to balance that and err on the side of realism.
So how conscious are you of the violence and even the sex that you write? Or because today's world, of course, there's a lot of sensitivities and triggers, as they call it, and things like that. Are you thinking of that when you write these, or do you just write how it feels, and you don't really kind of take that into consideration?
Well, it's not something I think about as I'm writing. Like I said, I just try to write realistically. But those are things that I think about afterwards, and when I'm presenting the work to other people. But I think crime fiction itself is kind of it already is kind of a trigger warning. It's a genre that looks at those parts of society that we're a little uncomfortable with, and where, people have desires and thoughts and things that are a little dark and uncomfortable. So I think most fans know going in that crime fiction is, it gets into things that are a little subversive. And I think that that's also one of the appeals, that you get to look at those things within a nice genre framework that's, that has an ending and a solution at the end.
So now your main character, your let's say investigator in the book, how much of you goes into that person, or where do you get that character from?
Well, I've described Wakeland as the millennial Jim Rockford. I mean, a lot of it comes from, just my reading and watching in the genre. I love the Rockford Files. I love, Chandler and Philip Marlowe. And especially Ross MacDonald. I love the Lou Archer series. So there's definitely an influence from those. But there are certain things that Wakeland faces that I've also faced. He's around my age, so he's, in his late 30s now. And he's someone who's gone through some of the problems that Vancouver and I think North America have faced, like the housing crisis. He sees evidence of the fentanyl and overdosing anytime he walks out of his door. So things like that are definitely drawn from real life. And I should admit that his sense of humor is definitely just mine.
So in essence, you're trying to capture the way the world is, or what's going on now in Vancouver, and incorporate it into this. So what was enticing to you with Rockford Files and stuff like that? Is it because of his imperfection? James Rockford's, like, the struggles he had and the things that were, let's say, wrong about him?
Yeah, and the fact that he's sort of in between. I mean, he's not a criminal, but he's also not working for the authorities. So he's this very strange neither nor position. And I mean, I think Garner as an actor is just amazing. And he does his own driving and stunts and stuff in the show. But I just like the fact that he was somebody who was always on the side of the underdog. You know, he was always trying to do the right thing, often failing or, having things not work out the way he wanted. But, there's something very endearing about somebody who's just going to go out there and try to do the right thing.
Right. So what makes a good book for you? Like when what stops and you kind of go, this is good. I really like this.
Well, I think the voice and the character are really important. And I think plot is the other one that really matters. The voice is usually the thing that I grab onto first, and then it's about the situation that the characters find themselves in. But about at the halfway point, if there isn't something happening, and if it doesn't seem realistic, if things are happening too easily, or if somebody's a series of coincidences are working out in the guy's favor. That's usually where I start throwing the book across the room.
I should get back to your characters and to how do you have what kind of relationship do you have with your characters? How do you see them, or how do you experience them?
Well, I think of Wakeland as, it's a voice that I can draw on, and a way to sort of look at the city and what's going on in the world. But I've always heard that writers will say things like, "Oh, the book just wrote itself." It's like, man, I wish this book would write itself. I mean, it's a lot of work, and it entails a lot of revision to get the voice right. I really want the book to be smooth and easy to read, and then to also have some substance to it. And that's a really tough balance to strike.
Well, speaking of voice, do you have? Because I've read that, as much as 50% of people don't have an internal dialogue. So I always like to ask, do you have an internal dialogue, an internal monologue? Can you hear Dave Wakeland and your other characters? Or do you create voice and dialogue some other way?
It's definitely more of a dialogue. I can hear him pretty clear, I would say. With the other characters, no, they don't sound like him. Often they're drawn from people I know, or, just certain ways that people will talk, but Dave's is pretty consistent. He will modulate a little bit in terms of if he's talking to somebody who's well educated, he might get a little bit gruff just to bring something out of them, or vice versa. But his voice is very internally consistent to me.
Does Dave Wakeland, does he ever surprise you as you're writing? Does he ever go off the rails? Does he just take the plot and go somewhere else?
Yeah, sometimes I'll find that I'll write something that is a very true statement from his point of view, and it will just not be what I expected or what I thought. So at the beginning of Sunset in Jericho, the mayor's brother is missing, and the brother is set up as this very kind of ne'er-do-well, kind of somebody like born wealthy and, has had a real easy ride of things. And this guy's gone missing, and Dave is almost contemptuous of this case. He actually turns it down at first, because he just doesn't want to work for a rich guy. He can't summon up the empathy that he needs to dive into that guy's world. And that kind of surprised me. I mean, he, as a character, it seemed really, what happens when the detective doesn't want to investigate the case that you've created for them. But, so that was a little bit, frustrating. And I had to go back and think, yes, like in his position, given what he's gone through, that's not the kind of case that he would, latch onto and say, yes, I have to solve this no matter what. So then the trick was finding a way to naturally have him forced to investigate and look for this missing brother of the mayor.
Are you ever killing people off that you know? Do you come across people that you don't like, or even ones that are just out in the street and you meet someone and they cut you off in traffic or do something? Do you take people that are bad people, let's say, or you don't like, and put them in bad places in your book?
You know, I don't know if I even want to admit this, but yes, there's somebody in this book that a very bad thing befalls them, and the reason it befalls them is because in their job they didn't cut someone else a break when they could have, and it was just one of those things of they messed with the wrong person on the wrong day. And yes, that exact thing happened to me, and I went away steaming, thinking, oh, if I was a little bit more of if I wasn't such a coward, or if I wasn't smart enough not to get involved in this, boy, I would do something to them. So yes, that has happened.
We have them on the other line right now. So well, I mean, I hear that a lot. So that's why, in a way, a good thing about fiction is you can also resolve the story how you want it. Like, you can sort of get some sort of justice. Where I know in true crime, it is what it is. So that's a big, it's a big advantage.
But it's also a problem, because once you start writing, and if you're trying to be honest about it and true to the character, you have to start seeing something from their point of view. And then you end up with this weird thing of, well, I started out wanting to put this person in just out of, vindictiveness, but now I kind of understand where they're coming from. And maybe it was a terrible day that they were having too. And, it certainly doesn't make it easy.
This is interesting. So when you're doing a series with a character like that, do you have some sort of a reference, or what they call a Bible, or some sort of thing to keep track of your characters that you use, not only just your main character, Wakeland, but the other people?
Yeah, I wish I did. The publisher started to create one for me, which is great. But, at the beginning, like with the very first book, Invisible Dead, I had nothing planned. I knew that Wakeland was going to be one half of an investigative firm, so Wakeland and Chen Investigations and Security, and his partner Jeff Chen would be the security guy, the business guy, sort of the Steve Jobs of their partnership, and then Wakeland would be more of the Wozniak, like the kind of a little bit crazy, a little bit out of the corporate mold, half of their partnership. That was just really where it started. And then both of those characters have grown, and Dave's half-sister, Kay, has become an apprentice at the firm. So, she's had her own arc over the books, and she plays quite an important part in Sunset and Jericho. But with the other characters, I've sort of just let them drift in and out. So some books, they don't show up, and then, we'll see them a few books down the series, and they've changed. And, that was what really grabbed me about doing a series, is just watching the characters change. And, some of the people that seem really down and out actually manage to figure things out and save themselves. And then, bad stuff happens to the characters that you like also, which, can be really interesting.
So do you know, like, how is your process of writing a book, and especially in a series? Or are you kind of pre-planned? Do you know how it's going to begin, and kind of the main scope of what happens, and then the ending ahead of time, and then you fill it in? Or do you just write as you go?
The worst thing is that I don't feel after 4 books that I have any sort of standard process. It's always different. It's always way more of a pain in the ass than I expected. Usually what I start with is some sort of scene or some sort of scenario. So with this book, it was the idea of having the mayor's brother and this other young man who both go missing and turn up murdered. And, just the dichotomy of having a very rich character and a very poor character, and having the resources of the city all going to this one guy, and this other guy getting very little, and Wakeland realizing that the two cases are connected. That was really what I had to start with. But drafting and then revising and adding things and figuring out the subplots. I mean, it always seems like I've got a good handle on the story, and then by the time I get close to the end, I'm just kicking myself, thinking, "Oh, you didn't think this out at all." And sometimes it takes multiple drafts to resolve that.
Well, I was going to ask that with revising. What's your editing process like? Do you wait to go through the full first draft and then go back and edit, or do you edit as you go as well?
Well, I write by hand, and then I type it into the computer as I go. So that allows me to fine-tune the prose a little bit as I'm going. And then afterwards, I'll print out a version of the book and go through it with a red pen and retype it. So it's a little bit slow and painstaking, but I feel like that really makes me it makes me care about each sentence and each paragraph a lot more than if I just wrote it straight into the computer.
Where do you see yourself going? Like, how many books will you do in a series, do you think? Or do you have kind of a four kind of shadowing, or how does that work for you?
Well, part of me would love to do the series forever, and another part feels like 10 would be a good number. One of my favorite series is the Martin Beck novels by a pair of Scandinavian authors named Sjöwall and Waklund. I'm sure I butchered that pronunciation, but when I wrote Sunset and Jericho, I actually didn't know if the series was going to continue. Without giving anything away, it really comes down to a real cliffhanger for Wakeland, where he is with the city, where he is with his firm. And I'm not sure exactly where the series is going to go from here. And to me, that's really the most exciting thing is, it's not the kind of series that just resets at the end of each book. I mean, he grows as a character. So I don't know where it's going to go, but I love the character and I love writing about the Pacific Northwest. So I'm going to continue to do that, as long as I can.
Well, how much research does it take to do one of these books? Do you have to really get into it, or can you just use your imagination?
It takes a lot of research, and there are definitely things that I make up. With the book that came out before this, Hell and Gone, I mean, I wrote, it was about a robbery, so I ended up talking to some bank robbers and emailing with a guy who'd served time for robbery in the 80s, and, talking to cops and lawyers and things like that. And then also just reading the news and trying to get a handle on what's going on in the city. And some of that is just stuff that you absorb, living here and having to pay rent or, buy a house and, some of the scandals around, the housing crisis and, money laundering and things like that. So those kind of things kind of seep into the book as well. But it's generally a lot of research, yeah.
It seems like a lot of very similar, at least, to true crime.
Yeah.
I was thinking of Al.
Well, how many years did you serve in jail for robbing the bank?
It's more fun than true crime, I think. But it's a lot of work. I mean, it's also just stuff that I would do anyway because I find it fascinating.
And so what came first? Was it the character, the story, or the location? And is there a kind of a way that you do that as well with each book, or is it different each time?
Well, with this book, I already had the character, but it was just this idea that politically there was something going on in the city that it really felt like class warfare was going to break out at any moment. It felt like the rich and the poor had, weren't even speaking to each other anymore. That politics had kind of gone into this very, divided place. And I think globally there's a lot of that too. But I think just on a city level, it was like nobody can afford to live in any major American city anymore, North American city. And I think Vancouver is just a microcosm of that. It's so expensive and people don't seem to care about that. But that is one of those things that comes home to roost. I mean, it's just, it's a ticking time bomb. So in the book, there are characters that have grown so frustrated with the city that they're willing to use violence to get people to listen to them. And that is something that I felt very strongly at the time. And I think it's only grown stronger that, if you don't kind of listen to that, then it's going to turn around and bite you in the ass.
I like being bitten in the ass, but
Well, it depends on who's doing it.
yeah, and how hard they're biting, right?
Yes.
So is there a serious subtext you kind of have, like when you're talking about such subjects in the kind of the baseline of the story, or they're going on while the story happens with your characters, is there a meaning you want people to take out of the book besides the entertainment of the story?
Yeah, it's a tough thing to talk about because, and I feel sometimes I talk too much about the social issues and that aspect. But I think, if they can get one thing out of the books, I think it's just a damn fun crime novel. I think it's well written and it's a quick read, and I think Wakeland's a pretty good character. But there are definitely serious things that I'm drawing on, and I do hope that. I don't want people to take a message from the books, but I would like it if they can see elements of their own life in these books. I don't think that there have been a lot of crime novels written about people in this, the generation that I'm part of that have really captured, what it feels like to not be able to afford a house or to not do as well as your parents are going to do. And, I think that people identify with that. And older readers too, where they see like my son's going through that or my daughter's going through that. So I think that that's definitely something that I'm cognizant of.
How do you get into the mindset of writing the bad characters, the evil ones in the book, the ones that do bad things, the ones that you want to be, the bank robbers, or say, or something like that? How do you get into the head or the personality in order to write that?
The scariest of those people to me are the ones that are the most relatable, where they're drawing from, some slight or some perceived slight that I could imagine myself going through too. So like I was talking about with the character that I added in, I mean, thinking about, what would motivate me to do this? Or if I was a slightly different person, what would motivate me to take action like that? That's sort of how I try to approach it. The violence can be really, really difficult to write, but I also think that, when you get that right, you get a really strong reaction from the reader. So that's what I try to go for.
Yeah, it depends on how evil you're making them too, right?
And it's also just the tone. I mean, if you read like a Jack Reacher book, Lee Child will have Reacher kick the butt of, 12 people at once, and there generally aren't consequences. In this book, when Wakeland goes up against a group of people, it's, he takes quite a beating, and he also has to be incredibly resourceful to survive that. And it was one of the most disturbing scenes that I've written, and oddly enough, it's the one that people have pointed out liking the most. So what do I know?
Well, listen, when you write a disturbing scene like that, I'm just wondering, do you need to take time off to decompress, to relax, to get away from the prose, or is that something that you can just kind of slough off and keep writing?
No, it definitely affects me. And then also thinking about what do you write after that? So in this scene in the book, Dave is kind of ambushed in the parkade or in the parking lot below his office building, and he knows there's no way out, and so he does something absolutely desperate to the leader of this group, and then loses consciousness himself. So right after that scene, there is a white page in the book just to represent, that he's out of it. And I definitely had to take a little bit of time just to be like, okay, where is this going? Because you can't really segue from that into, I woke up the next morning and made coffee and, everything was great. And, boy, my head sure hurt. The consequences are pretty dire for the characters.
I always become happy. I don't know, I guess. So are you gonna explore out and do other types of writing, or you think this is who you are? That's it.
Well, I've got another book in the works that's a standalone, and hopefully that'll come out next year at some point. I just really love crime fiction. That's really what I want to do. And I've written this series about Vancouver, and in the private eye, detective vein, but I love, like the heist novels and more of the Elmore Leonard kind of thing. And I really love the Robert B. Parker, Jesse Stone books that he did, which are just about a small town chief of police. So I'd like to write something like that that's a little bit less fraught and not quite in my backyard, so to speak. But I feel like I'm a crime fiction person through and through, and I might do a little bit of historical writing at some point or nonfiction, but I don't know. I don't think there's anything to be ashamed with of just saying, like, yeah, this is the genre I like, and this is the way I look at the world and want to discuss it.
Well, yeah, and you've committed so many crimes in your life, it's good to kind of work it out through your books.
Well, yeah, I mean, you write what you know.
You're right. Now, the criminal underworld element of stuff like Vancouver and that, how do you tackle something like that without getting, let's say, bad feedback, or, getting it right, and at the same time not getting people after you?
Yeah, funny story. There's a recurring character in the series named Terry Rhodes, who's the leader of a biker gang. And I heard from a friend of a friend that someone in kind of a similar organization had read the book, the very first book, Invisible Dead, and actually really enjoyed it, but thought that the biker gang character was a little unrealistic. So I think that's kind of a sign that it's in the right place. I try to write realistically about the criminal circumstances, but I'm not writing about any specific real persons. So also, I don't think a lot of gangsters read crime novels anyway. They're probably reading legal books, trying to get out of jail or something like that.
Yeah, well, we actually have a Vancouver gangster on the other line. He's going to say something. No, well, I think it's just tough. No, but I'm just thinking that if you kind of get the feel, like each city kind of has their own feel for what kind of underground, as we would say, crime is kind of going on, or what it's suspected of being behind, and stuff like that. Do you watch that closely, or are you kind of...
No, I watch it closely. And Vancouver has quite a few interesting wrinkles to their organized crime world. I mean, one thing is that it's very international. There's a lot of, transnational money laundering and things like that. So a lot of people park their money in real estate here, which has driven up real estate prices, higher than San Francisco's. And the other very weird thing is that the gangs tend to be multiracial. So unlike, back when the, gangs were all German or Irish or Sicilian or whatever, it's a lot of the younger gangsters, especially in the suburbs around Vancouver, are just kind of the guys that they went to karate school with, or the guys they, hung out with on the corner. So it tends to be actually quite quite multicultural, as strange as that sounds.
Yeah. Dave knows about that.
Yeah.
He's a karate school boy. He's nothing but gangs and
It's all gangs.
bad language.
Now, Vancouver has a large Asian community.
Much more so than most other cities. Actually, any other city I've been to, even San Francisco. Do you bring that element into the book as well?
Yeah, Vancouver has one of the oldest Chinatowns in North America, and it's also one of the places where, when the handover of Hong Kong happened, right before that, there was a real exodus of people from Taiwan and Hong Kong coming in, and during the pandemic, there was just a whole rash of anti-Asian, hate crimes and people blaming them for COVID and all sorts of horrible stuff. So I try to bring all of that stuff in. Dave is somebody who grew up like me in a very multicultural city, and his partner Jeff is from China originally, and I think it's important to represent the city honestly and to include them, and that means also including Chinese criminals and stuff. But the majority of people are pretty above board, so also not stigmatizing them. I mean, it's a tough line to walk, but I just want the books to feel authentically Vancouver. Yeah, it's changed quite a bit over the years, but it's just a fascinating city to me. I mean, even with the Olympics there in 2008, I mean, it's like just how that changed the city is very. As somebody who grew up here, it used to be kind of like a small town. I mean, it was a mill town, and then, now it's not only multicultural and very wealthy, but it's become a little colder too. So there's very few of us who are born here who still hang on.
Well, and so how do you choose what parts or what topics you're going to have out of the city into your book? Like, what are you going to include? What events? There's a lot of stuff that goes on in that city and has over the years. Is it something that you feel personal about, or is it just something that comes up randomly?
Yeah, I mean, I can't talk about everything, but usually something will just jump out at me. And, with Sunset and Jericho, it was just the gulf between rich and poor. And I think also the way that the mayor and the police and the sort of antagonism between them wasn't really serving anyone either. So those are things that I think just lent themselves to be included in the book because they're connected to the story that I wanted to tell. But I'll definitely also work in, just locations and places that I like, places I like to go drinking, places that I remember from childhood. I try to live up to that idea that Ian Rankin has, that the best tour guide you can get for a city is a book, a crime novel from that city.
Yeah, location can be really important, and to really get the feel for it. I guess there's a lot of overdoses and drugs and stuff. Does that influence your writing as well?
Yeah, I mean, Vancouver had the first supervised injection site in North America and was kind of the leader in the harm reduction movement. But what happened is that as soon as fentanyl became cheap enough and widespread enough, you have, hundreds of people overdosing every year. So it's a heartbreaking thing where the city kind of had a way to fix that, or to at least, keep things from getting worse. And then the actual drug supply changed, and now it's, just a nightmare for everybody.
So let's talk about where people can find Sam. Like, are you on social media a lot? Do you have a website? Where do people find Sam?
Well, I'm on Twitter and Facebook, but my preferred place right now is my website, which is samwiebe.com. And then I just started a newsletter at samwiebe.substack.com. And I'll post reviews of old, crime novels and things that I'm doing, and, little interviews and things like that there. So that's probably the best place they can get into contact with me.
Oh, fantastic. We'll have that up on the website as well, of course. Now, our guest has been Sam Wiebe, and the book that he's talking about, his latest book, Sunset and Jericho. It's a Wakeland novel. Thank you for being here, Sam.
My pleasure, Al. Thank you so much, Dave, and have a great day.
Thanks, Sam.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or shows, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Yeah. Good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.